Before helming such hits as 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining, Stanley Kubrick directed the controversial cult comedy Lolita, adapted from the Russian novel of the same name. The film followed a man who became romantically obsessed with his teenage stepdaughter, portrayed by 14-year-old actress Sue Lyon. Sue went on to lead a tragic life, and she blamed much of her troubles on the experiences she had behind the scenes of Lolita. Join Factsverse as we explore the tragic life and death of Sue Lyon. Sue Lyon was born in Davenport, Iowa, on July 10, 1946. Her father died before her first birthday, leaving her and her 4 elder siblings alone with their mother. The family moved to Dallas for a short period of time before eventually landing in LA. It was here that a 14-year-old Sue was cast to play the titular role in Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of the Russian novel Lolita. Lolita premiered on January 13, 1962. While the film would likely not even get produced nowadays due to its problematic plot, it was controversial even for the time. The film notably came out in the days before the creation of film ratings, when all films were forced to follow the strict guidelines of the Motion Picture Production Code. Because of this, the adaptation was forced to eschew much of the sexual material of the novel, and a creative decision was made to increase the character's age from 12 to 14, hence the hiring of 14-year-old Sue. Although the guidelines of the Motion Picture Production Code meant that Lolita was essentially a film that had been approved for all audiences, it still received a good deal of controversy. However, the adaptation was also met with a great deal of praise and continues to receive critical acclaim to this day. Although the film arguably isn't as widely remembered as Kubrick's later works, it's one of the most widely known of his earlier features. Lots of attention was given to Sue's performance, and the young actress even found herself blessed with a Golden Globe. Like the novel that inspired it, the film adaptation of Lolita was controversial for its depiction of a romantic relationship between a teenage character and her adult stepfather. In the film, actor James Mason played the stepfather. The stepfather is no hero, and his obsessive pursuit of his underage stepdaughter is played for ridicule and laughs. But the film's humor was likely lost on producer James Harris, who was mirroring the actions of the character behind the scenes with his pursuit of Sue Lyon herself. Sue became involved in an affair with James sometime during Lolita's production. Sources vary whether they became involved during the time the movie was being filmed or closer to its release, which would make her somewhere between the ages of 14 and 16. James was in his 30s, and friends of Sue recalled he looked old enough to be her grandfather. James apparently took her virginity. Despite the fact Sue and James never married, their romantic relationship was mentioned in a newspaper article around the time of Lolita's premiere. Like the film itself, the article kept from referencing the problematic relation too explicitly, though it did mention the two had been spending a lot of time together. At the time of the film's premiere, Sue was 16 and James was 33. Lolita remained controversial well after its release, and Sue became a vocal detractor of the film later in life. According to her, no child should have been asked to perform in that role. Sue went on to have lots of problems with mental illness. She married and divorced 5 times before her death in 2019 and maintained a tumultuous relationship with her only daughter. Sue continued acting until 1980, at which point she officially retired. James Harris had previously produced 2 of Stanley Kubrick's features, The Killing and Paths of Glory. However, the 2 never worked together again after Lolita. James's career continued successfully after Lolita, regardless of never again working with Stanley. He made his directorial debut in 1965 with The Bedford Incident and directed 4 more films over the ensuing decades. Today, he's 93, having outlived both Stanley Kubrick and Sue Lyon. When asked about his relationship with Sue, he refuses to talk about it. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation of Lolita had to change a lot from the Russian novel in order to meet the strict guidelines of the Motion Picture Production Code. The code was a self-imposed standard that Hollywood studios followed to keep their films from offending the audience. Soon after the release of Lolita, the Motion Picture Association of America, or the MPAA, replaced the guidelines of the production code with the modern film rating system that's still used today. The introduction of film ratings allowed for films to feature more inappropriate content. Lolita was a hit with audiences, and the film even spawned a successful hit single for Sue Lyon in the form of Lolita Ya Ya, which was a song that had been featured in the movie. Following Lolita, Sue appeared in Night of the Iguana, a film adaptation of the Tennessee Williams play. In addition to Sue, the film featured both Richard Burton and Deborah Kerr. The film was another big success, and many predicted Sue was on the path to true Hollywood stardom. Night of the Iguana premiered in 1964, and Sue next appeared in 1966's Seven Women. Directed by John Ford, the film featured Anne Bancroft, Margaret Leighton, and Sue as missionaries working in China. She then appeared in many more film roles. She appeared in Tony Rome alongside Frank Sinatra, and a biopic of Evel Knievel that featured George Hamilton. Despite her continued appearances in films, true stardom seemed to somehow be eluding her. She appeared in diminishing roles throughout the 70s before officially retiring from acting in 1980. Her final role was in the 1980 film Alligator, an exploitation horror picture about a pet alligator tormenting the people of Chicago after being flushed down the toilet. In addition to her many film roles, Sue also made guest appearances on several TV shows. Some of the shows she appeared on included Police Story, Fantasy Island, and Night Gallery. One of the reasons Sue had a hard time maintaining success was her failing mental health. She suffered from bipolar disorder throughout her life, which affected both her career and relationships. She was married and divorced 5 times and had 1 daughter. Her first husband was an actor named Hampton Fancher, whom she married in 1963. They divorced in 1965. During their marriage, he was an actor on TV westerns, but he later became better known as a screenwriter, penning such films as 1982's Blade Runner. After divorcing from Hampton, Sue didn't marry again for 6 years, but she had a relationship with folk singer Donovan during this period. Her second husband was Roland Harrison. Roland was a photographer, and he and Sue had a daughter. She was named Nona Harrison, and she and her mother maintained a tumultuous relationship until the latter's death in 2019. Sue soon divorced Roland and was on to her third husband by 1973. Though it's unclear how they met, Sue's third husband was incarcerated at the time they were married. Because of this, the ceremony was held at the Colorado State Penitentiary, where the man, Cotton Adamson, was imprisoned after being convicted of murder and robbery. He broke out in 1974, though Sue apparently wasn't happy to see him. They quickly divorced. After divorcing Cotton, she didn't marry again for nearly 10 years. Her fourth husband was a man named Edward Weathers, and their marriage was as ill-fated as her prior 3. They divorced a year later in 1984. She married a fifth and final time in 1985 to a man named Richard Rudman. This lasted until 2002. Sadly, Sue's relationship with her daughter was as unsuccessful as her many marriages. Nona has been open about her troubled relationship with her mother, saying Sue kicked her out when she was only 12. Nona has said she blames the way her mother treated her on her mother's bipolar disorder. This kept the two from having a very close relationship, and Sue likely died very lonely. Not much was revealed about Sue's 2019 death, besides the fact that her health had been suffering for some time. She passed away the day after Christmas and was 73. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share what your feelings on the controversial cult comedy are, or if you were saddened to learn about the tragic life and death of its 14-year-old star. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.